Okay, so good afternoon to everyone. How are you today?
Good afternoon, Doctor. Good.
Okay, sihat dia? Alright, so I think let's just start the class. Nanti when they come in tu nanti I'll just admit dia orang lah. Okay, right. So if you can recall, we kind of like came into this topic. Okay, so we have continued in this topic in the last class. Okay, so I think the last one, the 1 hour class was basically on the discussion on given scenarios and so on. Okay, so scenarios of different management and so on. Do you have any question in regards to that 1 hour discussion though? Any question or anything that you might need clarification ke? So that the 1 hour discussion, the scenarios of different apa tu, probably different issues, different aspects in a construction project. Okay, if tak ada Aiman, yes?
So far, no.
No. Okay, so if there are none, basically, hold on I look into my... Okay, so if there are none, we'll continue with... Okay, so we'll continue with the where we have stopped. Okay, so just to recap, we have actually entered on part 2 of the introduction to project management. So we have gone through classical theory, human relations theory, human relation belum. Okay, so we have gone through classical theory, scientific management by Frederick Winslow Taylor, and also administrative management by Henry Fayol. Okay, so we have gone through this. Frederick Taylor, basically when we talk about Frederick Taylor, it is very much related to scientific theory. Okay, so it is very much related to optimizing the way a work is being conducted. Okay, so basically he researched, come up with the best, most optimized way to complete a certain task. And once you identify that, you pass it on to the workers. Okay, so more or less that is the theory. And then develop also time and motion study. Okay, so he developed basically 4 principles. Okay, so there is a science, there are science in every job, which means we need to explore and find the optimum way, the best way to conduct a job. And then okay, select workers with the right ability to conduct the job. Okay, so even let's say you have identified the most optimum way and it requires certain ability, okay, certain strength. So obviously you need to find workers with that relevant strength that you require. Next, provide training and incentive to the workers, and finally you support workers. Okay, so that's Taylor, which talks about science. Okay, so the next one is basically on administration. So it still falls under the classical theory, but in terms of administration, which is by Henry Fayol. Okay, so the most important contribution by Henry Fayol is basically the functions of management which we are still using. Okay, so planning, organizing, directing, leading, basically controlling. Okay, so controlling. So that is the important contributions of Henry Fayol. And besides that, he also banyak yang masuk sekarang. Okay, so besides that, he also identified 14 principles that he thinks most organizations would need to have. Okay, so I think this one I went fast. However, let's see if you can answer just a few. Okay, so for example, discipline. What does it mean by discipline from his context here? Anyone that could explain what does discipline mean here? Discipline? Anyone that could explain what discipline means from his context? So do you need me to explain this balik? I think the other day I went quite fast, I think. Do you require me to explain this? Again?
Yes.
Okay, alright. Kalau macam tu, I better explain balik lah. Okay, so for this, right? For Henry Fayol, okay, so importantly is the four functions of management. But besides that, he came up with principles. Okay, so what are the requirements to have a successful management in organization? Siapa tu eh? Who is that? Nur Izzati Husna, could you please mute Nur Izzati Husna? Okay, so for the 14 principles that is being required necessary to have a proper management at an organization, the first one is basically specialization or division of labor. So at that point of time, okay, so masa industrial 1.0, and you can imagine based on factory, even now, the labors are being divided. Okay, so for example, packaging, and when packaging pun, you have different sections of packaging. So probably, for example, one would be installing the plastic and so on. So you have different division of labor. So meaning to say that you would do the same thing repeatedly. So obviously, when we are talking about management, and at that point, manufacturing with products which are produced at the factory, so division of labor is very necessary. Okay, even now, you don't get workers like knowing everything in the factory. So normally they are divided into certain components. Okay, so like car. So you would have certain components that you work on, pintu ke, or installing a windshield ke, whatsoever. Okay, so it's important in that aspect lah. Okay, at that point, obviously we can see so that you get better and better at it, and you kind of master that division. Okay, so it is necessary to divide the labors based on the specialization. Second one is basically authority with responsibility. So what it means is basically a leader, okay, appointed leader, maybe floor manager or whatsoever. That leader should be given the authority to command. Okay, so authority, but the leader in return should command, or basically should be given the authority, and should basically carry out his or her job responsibility. Okay, so basically with responsibility. So given the authority, given the power, but that power or authority given should be handled with responsibility. Okay, so authority with responsibility. The next one is basically discipline. So discipline basically means that at workplace, at the organization, discipline should be in the picture. So meaning to say that if there are workers who actually probably skip work, okay, so penalty should be given. And if there are what do you call misconduct, so penalty should be given. Okay, so discipline should be in place lah. Okay, so unity of command is basically unite. Okay, so we unite and listen to one leader. Okay, so unity of command. So dia tak ada yang 2-3 leaders, we are not sure who to listen to. So it will be more or less one leader for certain section of work, and the command comes from that leader, and the workers should abide to that command. Okay, unity of command. Unity of direction basically would be the unity of direction towards the organization. So normally an organization would have the vision, the mission, depending on where their direction would be. Okay, so maybe, for example, in construction, organizations are moving towards zero accident, for example. So the workers would need to abide to that. So tak adalah the organisation is moving towards zero accident, tapi the workers on site are basically disregarding all the regulations, safety and health regulation. So, for example, PPE and so on. Okay, so unity of direction, meaning to say that the workers should unite towards addressing the direction of an organization. Okay, aim and goal of the organization. Okay, the next one is subordination of individual interests. So, subordination of individual interest is whereby we need to keep aside our individual interests and prioritize on the organization's interests. Okay, so for example, I think in the last class I gave about this tuition. Okay, so simple as that. Let's say a teacher is having tuition classes. Okay, after schooling. Okay, tuition classes, but the tuition teacher should provide a similar quality during the classes in the school. Okay, so dia tak boleh lah during the school purposely the students are not being taught properly, just a little bit, just a little of the curriculum. However, with the expectation that the student would enroll for the tuition classes. Okay, so that one simple lah, simple explanation. So in an organization, there are quite a lot that people might be doing consultation work. Okay, so or you might have your own organization, your own small company. So but if you are at work, the priority is to ensure that whatever you are doing, it's to the interest of the organization, and your individual interests should be sidelined. Okay, so that's the meaning of that. Okay, next, remuneration ataupun wages ataupun salary. Okay, so the workers needs to be paid. Okay, so they should be paid of their work. Okay, so they should be properly remunerated. So perlu dibayar lah for the work done kan. So if the worker has done a very good job, maybe there would be bonus for good, excellent workers. Okay, so remuneration. Centralization ialah centralized decision making. So those days, obviously everything should come from the headquarter, should come from HQ. So easy to control any instruction and easy to do this decision making. So those days that will be that lah. Tapi with the current globalized world now, whereby we are practically borderless. Okay, so our email, our instruction could be sent to other countries in a split second. So then centralization might be quite an outdated strategy lah. Okay, so we have a lot of decentralization. Without decentralization, quite difficult for organization to grow. Okay, so that's why we have cross country, all those franchising and so on. Okay, so a lot of companies are not homegrown, so those are from outside or international investment. So decentralization would be the way to go. But imagine those days with not much of globalization and technology to communicate, then obviously is centralization lah. So everything comes from the center or HQ. Okay, the next will be chain or line of authority. Okay, so what he means here is basically every organization must have line of authority. You must have who is the leader, who is the sub-leader, who is the responding leader, and so on. So in simple, basically, an organization should establish organization chart. Simple. Okay, so line of authority, organization chart. So from the organization chart, you can see who is the top, who is the second, who is the intermediate leader, and so on. Okay, order, basically everything should be in a proper manner, orderly manner. Okay, equity basically is what you call people are being treated equally. Okay, so lifetime job, this concept is a lot used in Japanese theory, whereby workers are given trust, workers are given proper remuneration, trust, responsibility, that actually with a hope in return, the workers would feel appreciated, would feel honored, and they will spend the rest of their life at that job. Okay, so because when an organization having high turnover, maksudnya every 6 months you hire a new engineer, but after 6 months engineer quit, after 6 months the engineers quit, you will lose a lot because when we are engaged to one organization, usually they will be sent for training, you have gained experience, so throughout the years, you would grow and you would be a better engineer. Tapi imagine an organization, let's say after 1 year, the engineer quits. So you need to keep repeating the cycle of training new engineers. So difficult lah. Okay, so it's very difficult. So normally companies, organization, they would try to minimize on the turnover. Okay, so that they don't need to keep training and training new workers. Okay, so that's why lifetime job is important. And the Japanese basically vows on this thing. Okay, so providing lifetime job, loyalty, and so on. Okay, the next one is basically initiative. Okay, so initiative should be taken by all in the organization to enhance or excel the organization. Okay, to move the organization to a better position. And the last one is spread this corps ni is harmony at workplace. So it is the responsibility of the organization to create a harmonious working environment. So tak adalah you go into work and there are arguments, there are not harmony. So when the situation is not harmony, you cannot create that harmonious environment. Work could not be done properly because work are connected to each other. So even you are coming up with a certain, no one would be one man job, tak ada. So you will be connected to each other. So hence it's important first to create this harmony at the workplace. Okay. So far, any question on this? Okay, tak ada. So then we move on to the next one, which is suppose the one that we will be entering for today. Okay, so the next one is basically a theory on people. Okay, so if we get back here. Okay, so we have classical theory, okay, and then we have human relation theory. So we started off with being very dry, very objective lah, very rigid. So we talk about improving the work, we talk about improving the administration, but we did not talk much about people here. We did not talk much about how people behave, how people interact with each other, tak ada kat sini. So moving on from that, the people realize, or basically researchers realize that people actually play a huge factor. The social well-being of people actually give certain impact, influence the organization. So hence, they came up with human relations theory. Okay, so human relations theory, basically we can say the first, more or less the initial one or first one, Elton Mayer. Okay, so Elton Mayer basically introduced the Houghton effect. So the Houghton effect is how the story goes by. Basically, Houghton is a name of a place. Okay, name of a place whereby the research has been done. So Elton Mayer is basically a researcher that actually has brought in his team of researchers to actually research on how working environment influences the workers' productivity. So they have conducted this research at a particular factory in Houghton. So their initial hypothesis, their initial subject matter was about how lighting, for example, would affect the workers. Hold on, eh. So how lighting would affect workers. Okay, so having dim light would probably reduce the productivity of the workers. Having brighter light would actually increase the productivity of the workers. So they are having this kind of like how the function, the environment, work environment in terms of the facility would actually influence the productivity. So what happened is they went in, they have researcher monitoring the workers. Okay, so they try with dim light, and that is the productivity, certain level of productivity, and with bright light as well, certain level of productivity. So what they found interesting is whereby with a bright light and with a dim light, the productivity is the same. Okay, meaning to say that the lighting did not influence the productivity, but what they found out from there, they realized that, okay, just because we place someone to watch the people, so they realized that if people are being observed or being watched, they will perform better. Okay, so that is the outcome yang deviated from their objective lah. Okay, so they came up with a different findings. So at that point of time, they find that improvements in productivity, quality would result in okay, the improvement in productivity, quality resulting from the facts that workers knew they were being studied or observed. So meaning to say that basically you need to monitor your staff closely lah. That's the idea. Whether you are observing them or whether you are actually kind of telling what they are doing. So you kind of need to you need to make sure that the workers know that they are being monitored. Okay, so with that, they would actually give you a productivity which is reasonable lah. Okay, so basically, when workers are paid attention to, then chances are they will respond positively. Okay, so people have different sources of job satisfaction. And also another thing that he realized or they realized basically is whereby social environment at working place is important. So interpersonal relations are required in the job setting, meaning to say that you should allow the workers to have social interaction between them, and you should allow for such to the extent of having a union, a trade union. So this comes back to what I've mentioned initially. For in the administrative and scientific theory, they do not allow trade union. Okay, but moving forward with the human behavior ni, they encourage to have trade union because you need to establish a social what do you call social aspect. You need to make sure that the social aspect of the workers are being taken care of. Okay, so here is where trade union actually started. Okay, and style of supervision affects the level of productivity. So obviously, if you supervise and you pay attention to the worker's job, close monitoring, obviously that would provide you better level of productivity. But does it is it effective for managerial position? That's another question. If we are talking about workers, yes, it's kind of like you need to push them to work. This is how you need to do the job, and it should be monitored. But it might not be effective at the manager level. Maybe at the factory floor level is fine. But at the manager level, a certain flexibility should be given so that the manager could actually creative enough to solve the issues. Okay, so in this situation, we are talking about the workers, then obviously close supervision and so on would provide a good productivity. Okay, so next one. Okay, so 4 general conclusions were drawn from the Houghton studies. The aptitude of individuals are imperfect predictors of job performance. Okay, so there are other predictors that actually could give way to job performance. Okay, so especially when you're talking about when they are in a social grouping. Okay, so not only as a single person. Informal organization affects productivity. Okay, so trade union, for example, and work group norm affect productivity. So similarly, if you place them in a social environment which is positive, then your productivity might be positive. But if the group environment is negative, then it might not result in the positive result that we are thinking of. Okay, and I think it's important because it is very true. You know, sometimes when people say what we call the group of friends that you have represents who you are. So sometimes people, you know, generally, I would generally mention that normally people judge if we is I meaning to say that if we have not known each other or whatsoever, not in a close contact, so normally is a perception that we actually associate people with whom. Okay, so okay, this person A is the gang with this few 4-5 person gang A. Okay, and then you have another gang, you have another group of friends, and so on. So usually we would just say, okay, group A, this is the attitude. Okay, normally when we are in a group setting, especially with the circle of friends which we are close, we would act in the same manner. Okay, so that's why it's a very important. You know, sometimes parents cakap waktu kecil cari kawan kan. Okay, so well maybe it was not in a manner yang macam how to put it. It was just state so that okay, find a good group of friends, because that group would represent who you are. All right, so our setting, okay, because we have our set of behavior. We were born with certain set of behavior, but at the same time, in terms of your personality, it is also influenced by your environment. So the close environment that we would have is basically our group of friends. Okay, so sometimes that's why they say birds of the same feathers flock together. Sebab dia sama. Okay, so you will see that group, okay, more or less, you can see that why they stick together, because they have the similar trait. Sometimes when you are not of a similar trait, you kind of like you cannot get along the group. So even though you force yourself certain things to not to your satisfaction or not to your expectation, so then you might not be that well in the group. So normally if the group is so harmonious together, it has the same attitude. So obviously, if there are a diligent student, okay, diligent worker, I'm quite sure a diligent worker cannot get along with a group which is probably escaping work all the time and so on, because you cannot bring yourself to do something like that. So macam tu lah lebih kurang. Okay, so work group norms affect the productivity. So make sure you cari kawan, make sure because they represent you. You don't, because normally your friends represent you, so you don't need to speak in your normally. Okay, so that affects your productivity, that affects who you are at the same time. Okay, so and the workplace is a social system. So you can see that the progression of the theories, they are moving towards a human. So slowly they realize that if we can actually take good care of the people, feeling human, then we can actually be more productive. So rather than just thinking about how work to be done and the administrative part, they understand that at the end of the day is the people who is actually running the show. Okay. Right. So the next one is basically Douglas McGregor. Okay. So later than that, this theories actually came out with two sides of enterprise. Okay. So he pretty much just established there are theory X and theory Y. Right. So theory X is where people are basically born disliking work. Okay. And will avoid if can. Okay. And most people must be controlled, must be threatened before they will work hard enough, and the average human prefers to be directed and dislikes responsibility. And basically, what he's saying that only small percentage of community are born leaders, others are born followers. Okay, so I think you might be able to see surrounding you. If you observe, you will see that mostly people would fall into this category. If we have 3/4 not falling into this, but falling into theory Y, probably the world will be more at peace kot mungkin. Okay, so or actually the progression will be much more different. So it diverse that much. Okay, so in reverse or in contrast to that, he also established theory Y. So theory Y is basically associated with people who practically loves working. Okay, so working is treated as being natural, as being yes, playing, resting. So maksudnya a person that loves to work. Okay, and for this kind of person, control and punishment is not the way to make them work. But for theory X, yes. For theory X, you need to kind of closely monitor them. You need to control. You need to give proper instruction. You need to mention when you need that job or that task completed. So it is through action, through punishment that you need to make sure that work are being completed. So if a job is satisfying, then the result will be commitment to the organization. So normally theory Y would be leaders or would be at a managerial position that looks beyond just salary. Okay, so they might be looking into job satisfaction, responsibility given for a certain task and so on. Okay, so if it satisfies them, they are being they are being appreciated, then they will commit to the organization. Okay, so people usually accept and often seek for responsibility for theory Y. And for theory Y, people are self-directed. So you can see that there are two sides of the theory, two sides of the coin. So you have people at this level or this kind of attributes and also this kind of attributes. So, banyak yang teori X atau banyak yang teori Y? Okay. Are you teori X or teori Y? Any answers?
Theory Y.
Teori Y. Ada yang teori X ke kat sini? Tak ada orang akan mengaku kot. Ada ke yang teori X? Hopefully tak ada lah ya. Okay, so hopefully there are none. Okay, so you guys are going to be civil engineers. Okay, so at a managerial position. So even though you'll be joining the force as a junior engineer, but you are a thinker. Okay, so please don't fall into this theory X attributes. So sometimes in terms of disliking work ni, sometimes it might not be the work. Okay, sebenarnya if you look more deeper, it might be probably because of the work environment setting mungkin, ataupun the people is managing you. So it might not be the work unless it is really about the work. Okay, so for example, maybe you have entered civil engineering. Okay, tapi you really hate civil engineering, and then you got a job as civil engineer, probably it will be tough because you in the first place you hated it. Okay, so sometimes itulah when you apply though, you need to how to say why did I apply? Okay, so what was the reason for you to actually apply for civil or for any other courses, electrical and so on? Sometimes dia trap dia ialah when you were given. Okay, so let's say you had a few selection, but you were given, for example, civil, but you honestly dislike it, that will be a little bit difficult. Okay, so that will be quite tough. Well, to be honest, when I did my undergraduate, it was through UPU system. That was like 1998. So it was through UPU system, and that point, not much of internet. We don't have access of internet, luxury of having internet and finding for information. And coming from a small village, Kampung Kecil, I got no idea what is engineer. So basically, I got kind of zero idea juga lah. So I got no idea what is the task of a civil engineer, what would I need to do, no idea. So I practically joined the course. It was just randomly placed and selected, and okay, just join it. So for the sake of having one degree, I realized that over the years, okay, of doing undergrad studies, I find that through technically, I am not very keen on the technical aspects of civil engineering. I'm okay with that. I can do it, but it's just not to my interest. So then I realized that actually I am more passionate about the management aspect. So I'm just lucky because civil engineering or civil is part of a construction industry that actually relies heavily on a management aspect as well. So lucky me that practically after that, I found a passion. Okay, so very important basically when we are doing something, um, you need to have the passion. You need to have the reason that you are doing it. You need to have the passion. So sometimes, itulah, if you have that, but if you're not happy with work, it might be something else. Okay, so it might be influenced by the setting of the organization, the people, and so on. Then obviously with that, you might actually try to find another organization suited and so on. Okay, so with that, hopefully all of you falls under theory Y. Okay, so trust me, once you you are passionate, and you learn to love the work. Okay, so and with that you will be good at it. Okay, so maybe as a start you will be a newbies and so on, but once you commit yourself, you will be good at it. Okay, so once you are good at it and you're given certain responsibility to do it and you do it well, the satisfaction is it is sweet. Okay, so make sure that do anything, do it with commitment lah. Okay, so do it properly to ensure that it is not actually at the end of the day, it is about self-satisfaction. You will feel so satisfied that you have completed a certain task in a proper manner, and always think about the process. Okay, so if you have done the process properly, every step of the way, then the outcome will come naturally. So tak payah nak fikir outcome dia macam mana. Just do the process. So then the outcome will follow through. Okay. Okay, so comments on the theory. Basically, the theory sees that McGregor sees that the two theories are quite separate. Okay, so theory Y is difficult to put in practice. Okay, so that's why when we're because it's difficult to put in practice, because if you are having workers, okay, that have their own thoughts pun difficult juga. Okay, so you need people to follow the instruction. If you have too many of them doing different different process and so on, or different way of doing it, quite susah. Okay, so theory Y is difficult to put in shop floor in mass production. But could be initially used in the managing of managers or professionals. So managers should accept theory Y. So in your case, you should accept theory Y, and not solution for all problem, but it's a framework. So improve management performance. Okay, Theory Z is a combination of Theory Y and also modern Japanese management. Okay, so Theory Z is by William Uchi around 1981, whereby it is sort of like called Japanese management style, and it brings the best attributes out of Theory Y and also Japanese management. Okay, when we're talking about Japanese management, it is a lot to do with freedom and trust. So, for example, in Toyota, okay, around 1950s. So they are after World War II. So they are trying to grow their automation industry. Okay, so after World War II, you can imagine Japanese are quite constrained. Okay, in terms of capital pun tak ada. So they need to start small. They need to fully optimize whatever resources they have. So at that point, Toyota is trying to kick off their automation. All right. So not automation, automotive. Okay. So automotive industry, which is the Toyota car. So at that point, okay, so Toyota, the engineer basically went to the Western country. Ford factory to look into, it's like benchmarking lah. Okay, so the Toyota engineer went to the Ford factory to benchmark how they actually do the job. Okay, so and they realized that the Ford company, because of their wealth, okay, so they have the cost, they have the inventory, they have everything, tapi they resulted in quite a lot of wastage. Okay, other cars and so on. So, but for Japanese, they can't afford to have all those defects waiting in between. Okay, so they can't afford that. So hence, what they did is basically they improvise and they see that with that production is okay, process semua okay. Cuma we need to do it in a very thrifty manner. We have to do it in a manner that tak ada waste. Maksudnya workers are working and we do not have any door defect ke, the car defect, tak ada. And then we produce as the customer request. So tak adalah you produce 100,000 and then it is left in the storage. So they do it in such a way. But during that time, what I was trying to highlight is whereby the workers are given freedom. So imagine that you have like this factory, and you know, a factory basically the installation goes in a circle, for example. So from this station to this station to this station is in a circular form. So they allow each worker, okay, so each worker, the installation part, if let's say they have identified certain damage or certain defect at certain station, for example, the station of engine station, they realize there is a defect. One single worker is actually allowed to stop the entire production. So they have this kind of loching beside them that they can pull and stop the entire production to fix that problem. Okay, so that's why freedom is given, because the workers are being trusted. So obviously, with that responsibility, if you stop the entire production, because what they want is they don't want the defect to just rotate. So you found a defect, you stop it there and there, everyone focus, settle that defect, then the production could move along. So the workers are given that responsibility, freedom and trust to actually stop the entire production if they found something not right. So those is quite a huge freedom lah. If we are talking even now, if there are any like even in our system, any processes, workers are not given that freedom. So usually they will need to consult with the supervisor and with the manager and so on. Okay, the thing that, okay, we have a problem, baru we stop. But they have been given trust in such a way. Okay. And with that, usually the workers would feel that they are appreciated. The workers will feel that they are given such honor by the owner, okay, by the organization. So hence, usually will be written with loyalty and interest in team working and the organization. Okay, loyalty and lifelong, basically lifelong work lah. Okay, so Theory Z basically places more reliance on the attitude, responsibility of the workers, whereas theory XY is basically focused on management, motivation from the manager's organization's perspective. Okay, so basically these are the difference between theory X, Y, and Z. I think this one you can read through on your own lah, more or less what I've explained just now. And this is also similar to that. Okay, so Elton Mayer, Douglas, Yuchi. Okay, so the more or less the descriptions of it. Okay, and what is this? Okay, so recognize the importance. When we were talking about Horton, it's about having a social environment set up though. Okay, so social aspect. Theory X and Theory Z is about motivation by management and to improve management performance. Okay, and Theory Z is about the workers. Okay, so interpersonal skill, create a sense of family, and so on. Okay. Okay. So far, any question? 3. Okay, if no, let's continue. All right. So, have you heard of Maslow's hierarchy prior to this? Have you heard or come across Maslow's hierarchy? Pernah kan? So, I think Maslow hierarchy is quite common and I suppose you might have heard of it. Okay, so the theory is quite long a while. Okay, so 1940s, 50s, basically after World War II lah, or more or less during that time. Okay, so quite often that a lot of strategies on motivating workers are still related back to Maslow's hierarchy. Okay, so what this hierarchy basically mentions is about what motivates us as a worker, or basically what could motivate us as a people juga sebenarnya. Okay, so but in a job scope ni lah. Okay, so the first thing that we look for in work is basically in terms of security, in terms of basic physiology. Okay, so basically the first level of work that we or the motivation that we need to get a job is to get the money. Okay, so the money is basically for the rental of your home, for food, for shelter. So that is the highest or the basic motivation for us to actually work to earn something, right? So Maslow's hierarchy mentioned that you need to fulfill the most bottom one before you go on to the next motivation, next motivation, next motivation, and the top motivation. Okay, so you need to fulfill the basic motivation. So the biggest motivation for us when we find for a job is the salary. Okay, if the salary is okay, cukup, and maybe a little bit more that we can actually buy proper food, a rental, a house, and so on, usually we'll go on to the next year. Okay, so the next year is where we want a job that provides security. Okay, so security in the job itself, for example, whether you are having a contract-based job or whether you are having a permanent job. So obviously, normally people would feel safer engaging in a permanent job. Okay, so that you know, okay, it's long term lah. Tak ada lah every year annually you need to renew the contract. So obviously, normally people will go for a permanent job. Okay, and talking about permanent, mungkin government job will be secure normally. So normally those days they would mention working for government will be secure. Okay, so it's like you just work and then you have pension and so on. Okay, so another aspect of job security is whether the environment of the work tu selamat ke tak. So sometimes in construction, where construction is quite often being called dirty, it's called dangerous, it's called difficult. Okay, so dirty, dangerous, difficult. So it's a common association with construction. So that is where we need to kind of change lah. Okay, so that is the reason why IBS has been established and so on, so that the construction looks nice, tidy, with a good health and safety what do you call policy in place and so on. So construction, because nowadays we can hear also accidents happen here and there, engineers, fatality among not only workers but engineers. So obviously we need a setting which is safe lah. Okay, so an organization that takes safety into serious matter. Okay, so let's say you feel safe, you got a permanent job, and the work environment is safe. So the next year that we would look for is the environment that we work in. Okay, so the sense of belonging, the sense of love, maksudnya tak adalah love apa kan. So basically a sense of belonging lah. Okay, so whereby you have the working environment which is conducive, harmony. Okay, so that you still have friends and so on when you go working colleagues basically, that you can share maybe problem macam tu, but you rasa okay, we have a group of positive people working with a sense of belonging. Okay, so you got the money, you got a safe job, you got a good environment, a good social system kat work. Next one, you would need something that you could feel proud of or feel satisfied. Then is the need to actually cater to your esteem. Okay, so that and you would seek for to have certain responsibility. Rarely that if you go on, you get all that, because once you get this and get this and get this, so normally we will seek for something more. What would satisfy us more? Basically, the responsibility given to us. So you mentioned that everyone kat sini theory Y. Okay, there are no theory X kat sini, meaning to say that we would want responsibility. We would want people to trust us and provide or give us the opportunity to perform our work and so on. Okay, so they estimate reputation and so on. So obviously we estimate you will be given maybe certain you will achieve certain thing, and that will be a good reputation for you lah. Okay, so once you have achieved that esteem, okay, so the last one is basically self-actualization. Okay, so you would achieve your personal growth and fulfillment, and finally you are at the level yang you do not require people to acknowledge you anymore. You know that you have reached a level that it is time to give back sebenarnya. The highest level is where you don't need people to recognize you as the billionaire ke millionaire, but it is where you have achieved self-satisfaction, personal growth, fulfillment, and it's time for you to give back to the people. So if you can realize, like Bill Gates, in detail, I'm not sure, probably macam Jack Ma, who actually reached a certain point where lepas tu they become philanthropists. Okay, so they become, they are no more managing, or they are no more responsible, pass on to people, and it's more about helping or returning back to the people. So to that level lah. Okay, so dia dah tak ada level yang you expect recognition lagi. So you is there. Okay, so that's basically Maslow's hierarchy. So normally we will look into this, and so that's why sometimes when people say that job satisfaction is only monetary, not entirely true, because sometimes people would be satisfied with a certain level of salary, and then they'll look for the other things. So not only about monetary. Okay. All right. So Maslow's hierarchy. So each of us is motivated by our needs. So the basic is inborn lah. So for us to have the shelter, food, so that is a basic necessity. And we must satisfy each need in turn, starting from the first, which is at the bottom, and then slowly you will move on, that your motivation would deviate So once you achieve the first one, you would require the second one, third one to motivate you. So in your work. Okay, so only when the lower order needs of physical, emotional are satisfied, then we will go on concerning about the higher order. So then only, because if you are unsettled with the emotion, you are unsettled with your physical needs, it's quite difficult that you want to think about first personal growth or whatsoever. So something like that lah. Okay, so if the things that satisfy our lower needs are swept away, then we no longer concerned about the higher orders. Okay, so you need to make sure that the lower order has been satisfied, then you can move along the ladder basically. So, okay. All right, so these are just a recap of the management key concept. Okay, so organization, goal, management, and importantly, planning, organizing, leading, controlling. Okay, so far anything for this chapter? Are you guys there? Are you okay? Listening?
Listen, madam.
Ada ya? Okay, so at least give me some voice so that I know that you all are there. Okay. All right. So I think let's have a 5 minutes break. Okay. So it's around 5:07 now. So let's come back around 5, maybe 5:10 more or less. 5:07, 5:15. Okay. Sorry, 3:15. So please come back around 3:15. We will move on to the next chapter. All right. So just stretch yourself.
Okay, madam.
All right. Let's resume the recording. And let me share. Okay, so welcome back everyone. So it's 3:16. Let's just continue a little bit on the next chapter. Okay, so we have practically completed chapter 1. So this will be chapter 2 on history of project management. So Okay, so at the end of this, you should be able to recognize the history, current development in project management. You should be able to discuss the overview on project management. You should be able to discuss the characteristics of a project, because prior to this, we were talking about management in general. Okay, but moving forwards, we are focusing on project because construction is always a project. Okay, when we are constructing something, it is definitely a project. Okay, unless it's like macam emergency work and so on, yang just repair work, yang on maintenance nature. But if you have certain temporary time structure for it, then it is a project. Okay, so construction is commonly associated of being a project. And understand project management benefits and trade-off. Okay, so this one is another part that is very important. Probably we'll do it next week. Okay. All right. So next, okay, so the concept of project management has been around since the beginning of history. Well, if we regard, okay, so for example, the pyramids as being a construction project, not necessarily tepat lah, not necessarily how to say, not necessarily so, because at that point of time, okay, probably the cost constraint or the capital cost yang diperlukan might not be that restrictive as compared to now. Okay, because when we talk about a project is something that we have a timeline, we require cost for it, and we require resource, temporary structure, all those. So it's a project for a certain period of time with certain objective and so on. Tapi when we are talking about 20 over years of building a structure with maybe limitless of resource, waktu tu you have workers yang, you know, it was how to say, it was a lot of slaveries and so on, then they're not necessarily consider project management lah. But well, obviously, maybe there are some attributes we can say that is a project management, tapi not exactly lah. Okay, so at that point, probably the cost limitless kan, so at that point of time. Okay, so but we still mention it as, okay, is the construction has started, you know, that was that long lah. Okay, these were massive projects where funding, material and labor had to be managed and coordinated within a time frame to complete. So they had funding, they had material, they had labor, they had time frame, but we're talking about decades of work lah kan. Okay, so 20 over years of constructing something. So especially pyramid too. So but anyhow, the attributes are more or less there, but maybe it is very different lah those days and sekarang. Okay, so with the start of the Industrial Revolution, okay, so the needs of business industry became more complicated and grew in scale. Okay, so I did mention that the transition from a feudal into a revolution with people from the nature of agricultural to industrial manufacturing, so it gets pretty complicated. Okay, and obviously there is a need to manage the budget, manage the suppliers, labor across the country or across towns. Okay, so making it test the management skill, or basically started off with management theory. Okay, so it's just the introduction. So so these are just the golden two. Okay, so in the US, basically the forefather of project management is Henry Gunn. Okay, so if you can recall, we still use the name Gunn banyak nowadays. Okay, so the Gantt chart. So Gantt chart. So imagine that this technique basically has been in existence since World War lah. Okay, so Henry Gunn, and we are still using the chart as Gantt chart. Okay, so basically Henry Gunn invented the charts, the diagram to document, measure the processes involved in Navy ship building during World War I. So initially, when they talk about project and the necessary tools, skills, techniques, it is really pretty much about managing war masa tu. Okay, so pretty much about managing military items at that point of time. So even with that comes construction, tapi it is a lot to manage the military, managing war. So using those, okay, so the Gantt chart basically, so Henry Gunn is able to see the big picture, analyze the functions in shipbuilding. Okay, so the chart became an important tool for project management and basically being used until now. So 1950s more or less marked the beginning of modern project management. Okay, so if we go through this, you will see that it is still a lot to do with missiles during at the point of time. Okay, so Russia's lead in missile technology became important issue when members of the US questioned the missile gap. Okay, so the safety of the US at stake and so on. So hence they have come up with missile program. Okay, so at that point of time, they require tools to actually assist them in planning and strategizing. So they came up with a project management program called PERT. Okay, so Program Evaluation and Review Technique. So PERT is basically a program based on critical path method. Have you heard of critical path method before? CPM pernah dengar? Have you?
No.
No. Okay, because you guys are from matriculation, right? Kan kat sini.
Betul.
Okay. So, for students from diploma, they might have heard of it, critical path method, but from matriculation, no, because this is the basic tool that usually we introduce in construction project management subjects. Okay, so but later on we'll look into this in chapter 4. Right, so it is one of the technique for us to plan activities yang banyak. Okay, so rather than just placing it a simple Gantt chart, activity A, B, C, D, E, bila start, bila end, bila start, bila end, we are looking at combining all activities, because when you have tens and thousands of activities, pretty sure you can do it in such a way that activity A habis, activity B start, B habis, C start. Cannot. It will take forever. So in a project, you would have activities which will start together, finish together, necessary for you to start together after a few days. So relationship there more complicated. You can't wait for dah habis yang depan, then belakang baru start. Cannot. So that's why when we are talking about that, we would require network. Tapi critical path is pretty straightforward, simple. So critical path is for a simpler nature. Habis start, finish to start. But we'll go through this later. But anyhow, PERT is basically rooted back to critical path. Okay, so I think even if I say this here pun, you cannot get the imagination, but just keep it as it is dulu. I will explain later in chapter 4. So just keep it that PERT is basically rooted back to critical path, except that PERT requires 3 duration. 3 durations for a certain activity. So usually it will require optimization of the duration based on the shortest time, the most acceptable time, and the longest time of conducting a certain activity. Okay, so they're more like duration optimization. Okay, right. So later on, around 1960s, science principles were applied to business methodology. Okay, so theory of business, theory okay, so I think this one tak penting lah. Okay, so is compared to the human body. Okay, so in general, basically, I'll sum up here. So around 1960s is where they recognize that things should work in integration. Okay, so there will be integrated system to actually conduct the activities. All right, so around 1960s. Okay, so around 1969 that they came out with Project Management Institute. Okay, so in general, Project Management Institute is to serve the project management industry, not necessarily construction. Any industry that conducts project management. Every industry would have project management because you would have project. Dia tak boleh continuously just in a routine base. Simple as manufacturing. Okay, so manufacturing is in a routine base. So you know a factory runs like that every day. Okay, so every day of the year, you would have workers coming in to fix the door, fix the windscreen, fix the window. So it's the same thing. Cuma, even in manufacturing or even in automotive industry, you must keluarkan something new. Okay, so new car, new model. So establishing or coming up with something new would require a project. So the designers will be assigned to come up with a new model of a car, maybe a more sustainable hybrid car, for example. So obviously there is a timeline given to the designers. Okay, so how many designers are required? You need to have resources, temporary resources to work on the design. you need to be given a timeline. Okay, so you cannot design forever. Then bila the car nak release kan? Okay, so every industry would have project. Kalau tak, it will be static. Okay, so you would have factories running, you would have all the services running, but you would have certain thing to create changes to enhance what we currently have. Okay, but for construction, we are not repetitive. We are not like manufacturing. We do not have our daily job remain the same every day. So we do not have that every day we go onto the site, it will be sunny, confirm. Tak ada. So because we have rainy days, we have different workers coming in, we have different activities. Activities would vary every day. Mungkin hari ni piling, esok piling dah habis, then you would need to do the pile cap and so on. So that's why construction, it is a project. It is not routine. So they vary quite drastically from industries like manufacturing. So sebab tu sometimes they kind of argue juga lah, they kind of put it in, put it there that construction, our productivity is low. Okay, so we constantly have low productivity compared to manufacturing. Manufacturing may be ascending, tapi ours sama ada descending, or we are like, is there but it's not progressing well. So sometimes the argument goes back to being construction, we are macam mana, we are unique. Basically, we are, and the word like normally that we use is unique, one-off. Okay, so because once we construct and that's it, we finish one project. Even though the design is the same, okay, you can say that we have same design in different area. The workers are different, the weather might be different, so a lot of things that actually causes construction to be, dia tak standardized. Okay, it varies, every day varies. Okay, so you as an engineer pun, you go onto the site, problems would vary. You have different problems every day. So problem dia tak sama, tak routine, rigid, okay, macam ni solve macam ni. No, there might be different issues. Issue with different workers, issue with different suppliers, you would have different technical issue on site, drawing issue, it would vary. Okay, so that's why construction is definitely a project, but other industries, other sectors would have project of their own as well. Okay, so the premise of PMI, Project Management Institute, is that the tools, the techniques are common even among the different applications of project. So what they're trying to do is, even though we are talking about construction, we are talking about IT, software, it varies. Okay, the process or the procedure of managing a project is similar. Okay, so that's why Project Management Institute ni, they came out with a book guide macam ni, Project Management Body of Knowledge. Okay, so PM book guide is a thin, sebenarnya is quite a thin book. It highlights what needs to be done in terms of procedure. How do you manage? What are the input? For example, if we are talking about communication management, what do you need to establish a proper communication plan? So you would have input, let's say the stakeholders input, you will have input from the documentation. So that one, the procedure would be applicable same for all project. Okay, so the project is from software all the way to construction, the procedure is pretty standardized. So that's why actually they created this book, which could be generalized. Okay, so could be generalized to all sectors. All right. Okay, next one. Basically project management nowadays, okay, how do we see it? So globalization, okay, so elevate the importance of project management, especially since we are in a seamless environment nowadays. Okay, so many companies are expanding, setting up new business in other countries. So it helps that we have project management, because how do we manage that big of a data or that big of the extension, the network too? Okay, so there are tools and techniques basically that we need to have in order for us to systematically manage our project and so on. All right. So moving forward, or basically nowadays, there is a need for new, more sophisticated tools. Okay, so to accomplish complicated project management functions that evolve through design, manufacture, web-based, and so on. Okay, even in construction. So in construction nowadays, the tool or the item that you need to do. Hold on, eh. Why tak boleh tu? Hold on, eh. Lah, the pen is not functioning. Okay, never mind. So I'll get back to this when we go into chapter 3 juga. Okay, so the tools basically, or the system that is quite advanced or basically in advancement in terms of construction, is basically building information modeling. Okay, so you need to know that. You need to know the existence of building information modeling, BIM, BIM. Okay, so you need to know that that it exists. You need to know more or less how it functions and so on. Okay, so BIM is one of the system, or one of the, I wouldn't say it as technology, because some people associate that is as being, obviously it uses technology. Obviously it uses certain software to come up with the 3D model and so on. But it is more than that. Okay, so BIM actually functions as system that integrates all the stakeholders together. And also it is a data management system. Everything is placed in that model. So I think we'll go through that in chapter 3. And project management in Malaysia, we'll talk a little bit on that building information modeling. So if I forget about it, because it's not in your notes, but if I forget about it, please remind me to talk about building information modeling, because you need to know about it. So at least you have the idea, these are the functions, or what are the elements that BIM could actually do. And a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot of companies, but at least companies such as, or projects such as MRT would benefit a lot from BIM. Okay. All right, so overview of project management. Okay, so project has been managed as long as there's been project. Okay, so the term je lah. Okay, so because it would have started very long ago. Cuma we established a term basically 35, that this was like around early 20s, so maybe around 50 years old. Okay, influence small, influence. Okay, I think tak ada apa lah yang ni. Okay, so this is important. Okay, so the definition of a project. What do we understand about project? Okay, so it's a series of activities. So importantly, you must have activities undertaken by a group of people with intention to achieve a result. Okay, so you need to have activities planned, conducted by a group of people to ensure that we achieve a certain goal. So have that in mind, all construction activities are project. So you need to have certain work to be conducted, and those work needs to be done by a group of people. Okay, and you are doing that in order to achieve a certain result or certain outcome, which was determined or with the agreement with the client. Okay, so besides construction, many other things are project. Okay, research activities are project. Okay, so because research, we usually are given a certain amount of grant to research on certain activity, or not certain activity, research on certain subject matter. with certain temporary works. Okay, so with temporary organization. So you have several researchers working on that to achieve certain outcome. Okay, and other than that, product development, as I mentioned, maybe a new car design. Okay, so a new product, telephone, for example. Okay, so there are so many new features included in nowadays smartphone. Okay, so without product development, without a project in coming up with new phone, then your phone would have remained the same for quite a while. Okay, so and one of engineering activities. Okay, so traditional project management sectors. So obviously involve military. So in fact, a lot of project management tools, techniques rooted back from military. Government initiative. Okay, so if you look into certain policy, bukan policy, certain initiative, dia banyak is temporary. Okay, it can be ended after certain initiative has been released or has been done. Same goes to business initiative. Okay, so to enhance your marketability of a certain product, your promotion is done, or your thought of having the promotion should be in a project manner. Okay, so and you cannot rely on that type of promotions for as long as the business is there. So it will change. Other than that, legal cases. So you would know legal cases are pretty much temporary. Once dah dijatuh hukum, then the case closed lah, basically. Okay. Any big social event, even if you're talking about marriage. Okay, so you have marriage planner for that. Okay, so wedding planner for that. Conference, any academic conference. So this one is not a positive one lah. Okay, so any premeditated crime. So obviously there is an intention, there is a resource needed, there is a timeline needed. So in terms of definition, it falls into that lah. Okay, right. So it includes all deliberate creation of things and all deliberate changes to things undertaken by group of people. Deliberate maksudnya with intention lah. Okay, so with the intention to create things and the intention to change undertaken by people. Deliberate. Okay, so I think this one tak ada apa lah. It's just general statement je. Okay, so I think this is one thing that I would need to highlight as well, the changes in project management. Okay, with the change in the current situation that is getting more complex. Okay, so the change in project management is where it is becoming more concerned with the soft technique, less with the hard technique. Okay, so we are moving towards having a lot of not only soft copy nowadays, in terms of the nature of handling the project. Okay, so a lot of soft skill is being required and so on. So it is no more about working hard. Okay, I think same goes to everything. So you need to work smart. You need to think smartly how to manage your work rather than work hard. So simple analogy lah. Okay, so whether it's basically in that sense. Okay, so that's why it's very important. Even when we are talking about drawing, okay, so it is no more in 2D drawing where you gulung, bring it to the side, open as spread the not drawing and so on. So nowadays we are actually looking into drawings using iPad ke, Surface ke, something like that. So everything is I would say it is softer in that nature. Okay, so soft copy, soft techniques, and it becomes more seamless. So that probably less that you can see all those drawings in. Obviously, they still need it, but a lot of monitoring, a lot of instruction could now be done in a softer part. Okay, so soft copy nature. Okay. So basically, it is getting from predictable model to unpredictable. So those days, when you have clients with little knowledge on what are the other alternative they have, the model is quite predictable. So if you're the contractor or you're the designer, usually the client will have your idea and they will follow through. But with the change in the current environment, with the internet access, knowledge at the fingertips, it is getting less predictable. Okay, so you will get project clients who change their mind. So it is so tedious when a client changes the mind or client looks into different aspects of alternative. Um, Not easy. Okay, especially when your project is already ongoing and suddenly there is a switch in mind. So even though you are being paid to do the design, even though you are being paid to manage that, but once things are in order and is going progressively well, um, money is another issue. It is the effort, is the difficulty to change or redo back things that you have done, implemented to. So it is difficult. So, but that's the situation because things are getting unpredictable. So I guess it comes back with the clause contract that we have to ensure that every party is accountable and shouldn't be much changes lah. So if there is, proper change management should be in place. Okay, so basically we are moving towards a rejection of the stable model. So we are there lah. So it's getting unpredictable from time to time. Okay, so other than that, we are talking about project management, program management, change management, risk management. Banyak management. Okay, so we are not only talking about project management and that's it. So within the project management, we would have program management. Okay, so how do we manage the activities? Change management. If there are any changes, how do we deal with those changes? Okay, so you will need to have a proper plan layout. If changes were to happen, how do we deal with that? And risk management as well. Okay, so there are a lot of risks in construction. This is important when we are talking about risk because let's say you are importing an material from other country. Okay, so let's say we are importing material from the Middle East, for example, and COVID happened. So how do we manage that consequences? Okay, especially and if we are dealing with something that is from overseas, the hike in price, for example, hike in oil, for example. So those are the risks that could give effect to our construction even though it's material, right? So, but material plays a huge role. So if we couldn't receive it on time, there is a stoppage in terms of a supply, there is a stoppage because of cost, we can't afford to buy it. What will be the mitigation plan? So those should be thought of, especially when we are talking about expertise yang daripada luar negara or anything in regards to construction. Okay, so that could be one of the factors that could give way to project delay ke whatsoever. Okay, but risk is not only talking about delay, not only talking about cost, including safety, health, semua tu lah. Okay, so risk management. So the interest is basically in managing interfaces. Okay, so from adversaries to allies. Okay, so construction is pretty we usually generally see it as being very adversarial. Adversarial maksudnya every stakeholder, every party, they just care about themselves, right? So if there are any issues, usually rarely that any party would say that is my owner's fault. Usually there will be a blame game. Okay, so delay from this information because that person is not giving and that person and that person. It is such a manner that it is not very team based lah. Okay, so because the nature of the contract is as such. Okay, so designer is being given the contract by the client, and then client is having another contract with contractor. So the entity to berbeza. So obviously everyone have their tasks. They will make sure that the fault is not from them. Okay, so it is very adversarial. Okay, so adversaries, but the movement is basically from adversarial to allies. So that's why nowadays we have procurement system yang lebih teamwork friendly. Okay, something like a design and build is quite teamwork friendly. You have design and construction, a team under one either joint venture ataupun one organization tapi doing a design and construction together. So when you are working together, it's so much more easier. So rather than working as different entities, sometimes it's quite difficult to get the information across and so on. Okay, so but we are the construction is basically striving to move from adversarial to allies. Okay, so whether it's through joint venture, partnering, those kind of procurement system. Okay. Next, okay, yang ni nothing much lah. Okay, so the future of project management tu, this is nothing much. You can go through on your own. Okay, so the next one is introduction to project management. Okay, so let me see what time. Hold on, Okay lah, I think we'll stop here lah. I think we'll stop at introduction to project management ni. Okay, so far any question for today's class? I would take it that if you have no question, the class is crystal clear. You understand everything?
Yes, madam. Okay.
All right. Okay, so all right. Then with that, I think let's just stop here. If there are no other question, then we can stop our class here. Tomorrow, actually, I'm planning to do Kahoot too. I think tomorrow we'll be having the 1 hour class. So because I'll be doing like a quiz to recap what we have done in the last class. So I think tomorrow kita berjumpa, if I'm not mistaken, pukul 9. Anything I'll update in the WhatsApp group. Okay. So if there are no other question, we'll stop here.